guys, my name is Gae Polisner, and can everybody in the back hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I don't have to stand at the podium at the mic, I'm happier not to, but if you can't hear me, raise your hand and let me know and I'll move over. What grades do I have here? Eighth grade. Okay, so, and how many people in the audience, and you don't have to feel badly if you didn't, just so I can kind of get a sense of how much to talk about related to it and how much to talk about not related to it. How many of you here have read The Pull of Gravity? Okay, hands down. And how many of you were supposed to read The Pull of Gravity but didn't?
Everyone knows.
Good job. Okay. And of all of you, not just the ones who read it, but I'm going to guess that there's some overlap between the ones who didn't read it in this question. How many of you guys consider yourself avid readers? Of those who consider yourself enthusiastic readers who read a decent amount, how many of you consider yourselves writers? If you consider yourself a writer, keep your hand up. If your hand isn't up and you thought you were a good writer, how many of you would like to write that don't? Do I have any extra hands that go up? Yeah. Okay, so one of the reasons why I like going into schools or having schools come to me, and by the way, this is actually the first time, I told my kids this at home, I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, this is the first time that I am a field trip. I usually go into the classroom, so that was kind of intimidating for me to think that you guys are giving up your day or part of your day at school to come see me. So I'm hoping that you leave here having a little bit of fun and maybe learning something about writing, and especially learning something about having confidence in your writing and really confidence in anything you do. So let me just tell you quickly, for those who haven't read The Pull of Gravity, The Pull of Gravity is just a simple little story of friendship. It's a story of a 15-year-old boy named Nick who has a best friend named the Scoot, and the Scoot is dying of a rare disease, and he's not going to live past the age of 16. And Nick becomes friendly with a quirky girl named JC, and JC convinces Nick to go on a secret Whirlwind road trip to try to keep a promise to him to find his missing father before he dies. So it's just a very simple story of friendship, hopefully. And one of the things I wanted to do in writing it was to tell a story that could be classic. Do any of you guys know what it means to have a story that's classic, say, versus trendy? Oh, and by the way, for those who read the book, do you guys recognize these? Yeah. Somebody who read the book, explain why I have these here. And I'll tell you that if you explain why I have them here, I will give you a pair. Go ahead.
It was at the end of the book, when they were going back to Albany, they were eating candy, and they were wax lips.
They put the wax lips in. Don't say why. We won't ruin this book. It's a spoiler alert, so you did a good job. But the wax lips, back to me. So I got a lot of funny, silly little things when I meet with kids, because I get fidgety when I sit and listen to somebody talk. So I kind of like to play with things. So I figured everybody else does too. Anybody know what that is? Slinky. Okay. And you know why I have mini Slinkies with me? Okay, go ahead. Did everybody hear?
What?
So the girl, the main character in the book, JC, she's a little bit quirky, and she does things like wears Hello Kitty dolls tied around her neck and Slinky bracelets on her wrist. So when I go to these things, I travel, and as kids, who's doing my handout of stuff? You want to do it? You'll do it? Okay, so as we go, if you guys ask questions, if you volunteer to read, we'll throw some swag in. That's called swag, and I know kids laugh a lot when we say it's called swag, because I know swag has a different definition. But in writer's speak, swag is the stuff that you give out as a signing, most often bookmarks or postcards or something that let people know what your book is. But in the young adult world, we like to give out some other stuff that sometimes has stuff to do with our book. So I asked the question, what makes classic fiction classic? Does anybody know the answer to that? Go ahead.
It makes it so like it's not like it's kind of not unusual, or like it kind of does what it kind of.
It's hard to define, isn't it? You're skirting around it. Go ahead.
I think what makes a classic book classic is that no matter how young or old it is, it'll always be remembered for its literature.
That's exactly right. That classic, something that's classic isn't trendy. So you guys all know what trendy or something that's a fad is.
Yeah.
So maybe, the vampire stories that are around now, maybe some of them will be classic if they have more to them than just the vampire edge. They are a good story of friendship or family or something like that underlying it. But something that's trendy is the opposite of something that's classic. And so I was trying, when I wrote The Poet Gravity, to write a story that you might be able to pick up 20 years or 50 years from now, and that it would still be a story that made sense and that someone could connect to. And basically, I think the things that make a story classic is that they stay very close to those very basic feelings we all share. Feelings about friendship, feelings about family, and our families when they're not doing well versus when they are doing well, and first love. And to me, a lot of the famous stories all have to do with the first relationship that somebody has. So I touch on all of those things in The Poet Gravity. When I told you, or I asked you the question, how many of you would write if you didn't think that your writing was bad or would like to write, the thing that you should know about me and other authors like me is that most of us don't think our writing is very good in the beginning. Or, better yet, we write something, we think it's great, and we put it in a drawer, and we take it out a month later, and we read it, and we're horrified. And what we thought was good doesn't read well. And what you guys read in a book like The Poet Gravity is not the first draft of something that gets written. And it's not the second draft, and it's not the third draft. Sometimes it's not the 10th draft. It depends, but it's really something that's been polished. I used to think of the image, anybody used to have those rock tumblers? Where you put the rough stones in the machine and they'd have to go around and around and around, and if you open the machine too quickly, it wasn't quite as smooth as it was supposed to be. So really with writing, none of us are good writers when we pick up our pen and put it to our paper, and that goes for everybody. So if you say, oh, I want to write something and I have this great idea in my head, and then you get a piece of paper out, as we're going to do today, and you start to put something down, and you're writing it and you think this is garbage, you're right. It's very often garbage, as are the things that I sit down at a computer and write when I think I have a great idea in my head and I start to put it down on paper. Now, you may think that the thing you wrote is great immediately, and it may be, or it may have some elements that are great, but other elements that need to be polished. But what I want you to know is if you start to write it and you feel very discouraged at first because it's not great, then, and you want to write, then you're making a mistake. Because nobody's writing, not mine, not J.K. Rowling's, not John Green's, not that I'm comparing myself to them at all, but none of those people have days where they don't pick up what they wrote and go, oh my gosh, this is absolute garbage. And so The Poet Gravity is actually my third novel. I started writing about 12 years ago now, and actually that's not true because I wrote as a kid, and I wrote as a teen, and I wrote when I went to college, and then I went to law school. And I actually became a lawyer, which I still am, and I go off and practice law when I'm not writing. And so about 12 years ago, I decided that I missed the creative side of me, so I went back to writing then. It took me about 5 years, because I had babies at home, to write my first novel. So I was like, oh, okay, this is better than I thought I could do. Maybe I want to try and get an agent. And I sent that out to agents, and I got 2 years of rejection, solid rejection. And the great thing is that I have kids at home. Because if I didn't have kids at home, I might have quit. Because it's really, really hard to get rejection and rejection and rejection. But I had these 2 little kids watching me, and I thought, I'm going to show them something. I'm going to show them if you really do love something and want to make it happen, and you stick to it, even when someone says no, even when someone says you're not good enough, even when somebody says, I don't like this, or you at all, or what you bring to the table, that if you keep on believing in it and working on it and fixing it and polishing it, that eventually somebody who connects with what you do will find your work and say yes. And so who thinks that happened with that first manuscript where I got all that rejection and finally somebody said yes? That's the right answer, nobody. I then finally got an agent on that, but no publisher. They all said no. So I wrote a second manuscript, and we sent that out to publishers. Who thinks I got finally a deal on that second one 8 years later? Right. So Pull of Gravity is my first book that actually got published, but my third manuscript that I've written. Why did I write young adult? I gave you a clue. Anybody know why they think I switched from writing women's fiction to young adult? Let me see if anybody will raise their hand that didn't yet.
Because you said that she wanted to make this book classic, so when teenagers read it at this age, you might read it later, in like a few years, like in the future.
Yeah, that's one reason. I think I always desired to write for teens and write the kinds of books that I read that really affected me as a reader in the beginning, things like The Outsiders. Anybody read that? Wrinkle in Time. Anybody read that? Yeah, so I think that there was that desire, but there's something more basic why I said, wait a second, I'm writing women's fiction, let me switch over to writing for kids or young adults. Anybody hear me mention them? That's exactly why, because I have kids of my own, and I was reading aloud to them every night, 2 boys. At the time they were like 9, 7, 9, 8 and 10, whatever they were. And I was reading aloud to them every night, pretty religiously. There wasn't a night that we missed reading aloud, even though they could read books on their own as well, but I loved reading aloud to them. And they liked realistic fiction. They didn't like Harry Potter. They didn't like most sci-fi, although they did like Star Wars, but the movies, not any books. And I say that, who knows why I say they did like Star Wars? Star Wars is awesome. Who knows why I mentioned that my boys like Star Wars? Go ahead. Yeah? Yeah?
Oh, because you put them in the book.
Because in the Pull of Gravity, there happens to be a lot of Star Wars reference. Do I have any big Star Wars fans here? Of the Star Wars fans, do I have anybody who read the book?
Yeah, they have.
All right, so one of the things, the only reason I ask you that question is because my 2 boys were very, very avid Star Wars fans. So there's a scene in the book where they take out the lightsaber, you turn it on, and the light goes up the lightsaber, and it's a couple of scenes, one poignant scene. And the only thing my sons wanted to know, particularly my older son, who is my critic's son, is why I used the Star Wars quotes from the bad movies instead of the good movies in the book. And I explained to him that I used the Star Wars quotes that fit the story as the story went along, and that I really didn't worry about which movie they were from. On the point of movies, I actually have a production company who are in the process of trying to sell the screenplay for the movie. And they've done some fun stuff with the script because they're really trying to pull some of the Star Wars stuff out even more so than it's in the books. That's a lot of fun to see when reading the script. Like they have little references that even I missed because I wasn't a huge Star Wars fan, but my kids were, and so they'll make some reference that actually picks up to the Star Wars movie and it just goes right over my head. They're like, didn't you love that? I didn't notice it. So, you guys just did some writing on some flash fiction unit? Who did flash fiction? Everybody. And did you guys like it? Yeah. Who said yes? Hands up to who said they liked writing flash fiction. by the way, well, if you've answered a question, come up at the end and we'll make sure you get stuff. And really, I have enough stuff for everybody, so don't worry about it. Somebody who likes writing the flash fiction, tell me why. Somebody, hand up, somebody who can answer? Go ahead.
It really shows how you can express like a larger, greater human significance in a short amount of time, like 5 minutes.
Right. Real short time. Go ahead.
To add on, you can like relate to the character, even if like a short moment.
How long was the flash fiction you guys wrote? Okay. Did any of you guys, do you want to tell me what you liked about writing flash fiction? I saw a hand go up way in the back.
It was harder to write a shorter story than a longer one because you have to really think about what you're putting in the story.
I agree with you 100%. I think it is so difficult to write a good, full-blown story that's interesting in such few words. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with him because like you have to kind of make every word count to get across to the reader the message that you're trying to send.
Right? Mm-hmm.
I also found it difficult to like put in a lot of detail into my writing because we had a maximum of 1,300 words, I think.
Oh, so some of you got more words than others, huh?
Well, what's great about it was, even though it was hard to put into a short amount of time, I really related to my main character and my main character because they were actually how I would depict myself and say a point in the future.
Right, right. Yeah, so go ahead. Go ahead, right there. Somebody.
Oh yeah, and flash fiction usually by the end, like you get to the point, like you understand like the meaning of it.
Did you guys read the most, I would arguably one of the most famous flash fiction stories that's only a few words long by Hemingway? Did you guys see that one?
No, we didn't do that.
When I was originally coming here, when you guys were coming in October, we had the hurricane, and you were working in the middle of flash fiction. I printed up a few things then to go with the unit, and this is one of the things that I think is so cool. There's two of them actually. Hide. The other one, I don't know if you see it or not. This short story is arguably the shortest story on record. Now watch it. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it also, you have to think about what it means. And it's attributed to Hemingway. And this is the story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
What?
Somebody want to explain why it's a full story? Go ahead.
Well, probably like somebody was expecting a baby, but then they probably lost it in the process.
Right, right. The amazing thing about this little tiny bit of words is that it tells you, not only tells you so much, but once it hits you what it's about, in this short bit of words, you actually feel something and you start conjuring where the story might have gone or the point before where it began.
Yeah, like each part of it, like baby shoes and they represent like a lot more than what they.
Right. Right. So that always strikes me as really amazing that Hemingway, I guess no surprise that Hemingway could do it, but he was actually quite verbose and wordy in that he also did this. Here's another one that I really like, you guys. Did you do the sort of the eeriest or scariest piece of flash fiction? By Frederick Brown? Did you guys see that one? These are real, these are super flash. Now if I were going to be intrigued to go home and try to write a piece of flash fiction, I'd love to try to write a really short one. I think that's a really fun exercise. I don't know that I could. Listen to this one. The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock at the door. Can somebody think this is a good story? The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock at the door. Somebody who hasn't talked? Yeah?
Can you read it again? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, sure. The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock on the door. Did you hear it that time? Now I do. Yeah? Go ahead. Do you want to explain why it's a good short story? No, you right there. Yeah.
It makes you think a lot. Like, you can think that maybe that since it might have been like a thought that he was the last man, but obviously there's a knock.
Obviously, someone is knocking. Yeah? Go ahead. Somebody writes the quote right back there.
And then it makes you think maybe he's not even on Earth. Like maybe it's like a weird combination planet or something. Like
Go ahead. I really love what you just said. What you said is that it gives you space to use your own imagination. So the cool thing about this and writing any book, so let's go back and talk about my book or another book like mine for a second, is that when I write as a writer, I like there to be room open at the end for you to interpret what happened a little bit yourself. Some people don't like that. Some people like everything really clearly tied up in a tight little knot with a period at the end. This is exactly what happened when they got home. This is what everybody said. This is what everybody did. Who likes that at the end of a book for it to be really clearly tied up? Okay, hands down. I like your lips. Who is okay with the story leaving you room at the end to interpret a little bit about what happened? Okay, so somebody who read Full of Gravity, put your hands up. Somebody who read and likes Full of Gravity, put your hand up.
Come on.
Back there. Did you mind that did you feel like at the end you knew exactly what happened?
no, not at all. Like, cause like things weren't finalized with Nick's dad or anything. We didn't know like what was gonna happen with Scooter's mom and Nick's dad, and what would happen when he got home and how things would be. So,
did you find yourself thinking about what you thought the answers to all those things were?
Yeah, I thought about it, but it just kind of like it's difficult to think about it though because there's so many unanswered questions. So.
I think one of the reasons I like to do that is I feel like in all of our lives, every day at the end of the day there are unanswered questions. And there are a number of choices about things that might happen, but we don't know what they are. And any intervening thing could change what we thought was going to happen completely anyway.
Maybe another example of that is in the end of The Giver. When you have no idea, well, I know there's the sequel now, but I had no idea what happened. I knew what I wanted to happen, but it kind of drove me crazy not understanding.
Yeah, The Giver, another ending giving you. I wonder if with The Giver, knowing that it was going to be a series, or that there would be another book, that they left it more open-ended. I feel like in the Full of Gravity, there's only, Nick's dad is going to be happy or not happy. Scoot's mom is going to be happy or not happy. I'm trying not to completely spoil it for people who haven't read it, but there's only a few things that are going to happen. Nick and JC are going to stay friends or not stay friends. But the next day they're certainly going to be friends and probably more. And so I kind of feel like we all know what the end is. How many people think that someone who meets in 10th grade is getting married, or you know what I mean? So there's only so many answers. We all know what the story is that plays way out. They go off to college, they go to work, whatever it is. And so sometimes I don't feel the need to tie up those neat bows just the moment.
Well, I think it's better if it's not completely clear, because I don't think everything in life is going to be given to you completely clear, and not so that you can comprehend, so that you have to kind of infer about it.
I agree. So these are all, did you want to add something?
Yeah. I was going to say that I think it's a good idea to how there's going to be some kind of area of mystery to the end of the book, because if you think about it, well, there's no, what's the point of giving an ending to something when you want people to say, oh, I think this is going to happen, I think this is going to happen. People are going to start liking the book if there's a mystery to it.
Well, that's a good point, actually, because one of the things is if you ever ask me if I wrote mystery, you made a very good point. If you ever ask me if I wrote mystery, I would tell you absolutely not. I write realistic fiction. Until it occurred to me that every story we write, if it's an interesting story to read, is actually a mystery. The reader, if you tell the reader from the very beginning everything that's going to happen, then they're not going to read the book. So really, if you think about it, every story you tell as a writer or as a storyteller is a mystery. It starts out with a beginning. Who knows what you need to keep a reader reading when you open a book? No, I'm correct.
I think it's like you kind of have to like keep making questions so they keep like asking themselves what they're doing.
It's got a word for it when you're writing. Does anybody know the word, what you're trying to do with your reader?
What's the word?
You said it. Hook them, right? Is that what you said? Hook them. Yeah, the beginning of a story has to have a hook. It has to have conflict. You have to open the pages and almost immediately feel some conflict that makes you as a reader want to know what's going to happen. Now sometimes a book will take its time a little bit and the conflict will come soon but not in the opening paragraphs or opening page. And if you're not going to give that conflict right away, then what you have to do first is create character. How many people would read a book if they didn't care about the character that was telling the story in a short period of time? Anybody read a book if they don't care at all about the character? A few people. Why would you read it? What would you be looking for if you don't care about the character?
I would be looking for the plot too.
Right. So there are some readers who, you know, you hear, maybe you guys not so much because you're younger, but you'll hear about a book that's a bestseller, like the Da Vinci Code or, you know, Dan Brown's book, and then people will start talking about the writing wasn't good or the characters weren't good, and yet it will sell a ton of copies. And that's because people will absolutely read for plot. So if you hook them early on, but your characters aren't necessarily great or the writing's not great, but the story is enthralling, people will keep reading. I'm kind of a reader of the other side. I'm a reader that if I read an opening paragraph and I immediately feel for the character, I immediately see myself in them or find them so different from me that there's something intriguing, that I will almost read a book that has no story if the writing is beautiful or the character is intriguing. Although certainly the best case scenario is to have both of those things together. How many people have read a book where the story isn't yet holding their attention, but they care about the character and they're still curious to find out what's happening with that character? And then they suddenly realize they like the book, but they're halfway in it. So yeah, so those are kinds of the two different things to bear in mind when you're writing. Are you going to make your reader feel that character right away? Are you going to hook that writer with a story right away? Are you going to do it from the opening line? Are you going to set scene a tiny bit? Did you want to say something? You? Mm-hmm.
The beginning book has a very strong plot.
Right.
So you have to keep on reading to see the book.
Right, right.
Well, my favorite kind of manga is realistic fiction too, and I like reading books that connect to me and make me feel like kind of, oh, this character, so I feel for the character, because if it's not, I kind of get bored with it. So I like a problem and then resolution.
Right. So that's great. You just actually said the next word. We're talking about hooking a reader, and one thing that hooks them is character and good writing, and the next thing that hooks them is conflict. So if you don't quite understand what a hook is really a conflict, and that's what you were talking about, that there's a problem immediately. You can see the problem. Somebody died, somebody's upset, somebody has left home, whatever the case might be, somebody's unhappy. The conflict can be huge or it can be small, but there's got to be an immediate conflict. Somebody likes somebody and they're not paying attention to them, whatever that case might be. You have to hook them. So what we're going to...
I also like it when in the beginning of the book it starts with a sense of foreshadowing.
Where like the end of the book, you can read in the beginning something that would happen in the end of the book, and it sort of gives you a sense of what the whole entire book is about.
Right, another form of hook is to foreshadow what's happening way down the road, but then you want to know how they got there. I just read a surprising statistic, or it didn't really have a number attached to it, but a surprising fact. Maybe it did have a number, but I don't remember it. And they said that a lot more people than you think, if you tell them the last page of the book or the last line of the book, it doesn't ruin the book for them, or what happens at the end, that a lot of readers, it doesn't change their enjoyment of the reading to know the end. And I think that's a little bit what you're talking about, is sometimes the end of the story is the hook. Sometimes the back of the book will basically tell you what the story is about, and it's not stopping you then from reading the book, because that's enough of a conflict or a hook. So we're going to try to do a little writing exercise in a few minutes. We're going to do a 5-minute writing exercise, 5 minutes. But I want you to start thinking about it and tell you a few more things before we start it. So hang in with me for a few more things, because I find when I go to the classes and I do this, that it really does help your writing a bit to think about it. So the first thing you're going to do when we do our writing exercise is you're going to think about who your character is. So I'm not giving you a character. Is it a girl? Is it a boy? Are you going to write from the perspective of your character? In which case, you would be using the word I. You'd be writing from first person I. Or are you going to write from third person? You're going to have your main character be George, or Steve, or Anne, or whoever your third person character. But it's not enough just to decide who they are by name, but you have to think a little bit about what characteristics make them an interesting person for someone to read about. And we're only going to do a little 5-minute thing, so as you write, and as you're getting stuck writing, remember that you can do work in your writing to think about what makes your character interesting. I want to talk a little bit about show versus tell. Have you guys ever heard about that?
Yes.
Yeah. Who thinks that they can give an explanation of show versus tell well? And I will show you my answer to that. I am not. I can read an example, but it's hard for me to explain. Go ahead.
With showing, you show to kind of, you write something and you have to kind of make the reader infer what's going on, rather than telling, which is just saying, oh, she is sad. Or you can show it by saying, like, what maybe what her, the expression on her face, what she's doing, to show that the character is sad or something like that.
Right. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet want to add to that? Did you speak? Anyone who hasn't spoken back there? Go ahead.
Okay, so kind of like just adding on what she said, showing is kind of when you show something rather than telling it directly. Showing is kind of like, in writing at least, a way of directing a point to a reader without giving it directly. So telling would be giving the point to the reader directly. Showing would be indirectly, but still giving the reader the information that it needs.
As good a job as I could do. Did you want to add something? No? All right, so for me, it's really, you guys did a good job. It's really very hard for me to describe what show versus tell is, but I have these examples that I sat down and did the first time I was doing this with the class. So they're just pulled out of my head. And one of the things is that I over-exaggerate the difference for you. So you don't necessarily have to go as over the top as I have in here. I'm a fan of spare writing and pulling back a little bit, but I did it to kind of make the point for you. So I'll show you one example of show versus tell, and you can tell me if that makes you feel it a little bit better. Show is, the boy was big and mean, and I was scared of him. The boy was big and mean, and I was scared of him. That gives you a lot of information, right? What's the boy like?
A bully.
And what was the second person in the picture feeling? Scared. And who thinks that that was interesting when I just read that sentence? Okay, so now how about this? Don't move. He presses his full heft against me, even though we both know a mere fraction of his force would be more than sufficient to hold me here. I squirm, but no chance I'm breaking free. The bricks indent their rough grooves on my face. Of course not, I say, but it escapes as a wheeze, and I'm wondering how much longer I can breathe. Did I just tell you that one boy was big and mean and the other one was scared of him?
Yes.
I showed you. I showed you.